What are little boys made of? Frogs and snails and puppy dogs' tails? Actually, no, they're made of fat and bone and blood and a bunch of other things. And so today I am going to get my body composition evaluated here at the Central Oregon Community College. Stick around for a body in progress. Just what exactly are you and I made of? That is a topic called body composition. When a bodybuilder or a personal trainer or other related people refer to body composition, they're simply talking about everything that makes up your body. And the components that make up your body are grouped into two categories. The first is lean body mass. Lean body mass, sometimes abbreviated LBM, is simply everything that is you that is not fat. So your bones, your organs, all of the tissue, the fluids inside you, all of that is your lean body mass. The other category is the body fat. And the only thing in that category is the body fat. It is the substance that makes you fat. Body composition is usually expressed as a percentage, so that a 200-pound person, with 180 pounds of that being lean body mass and 20 pounds of it being body fat, would be said to have 10% body fat. As much as body fat is presented as the enemy, oh, I've just got to get rid of all this fat, you do need some. It's part of your body and it's part of what makes your body function. Now, a bodybuilder preparing for a competition who wants to get as much fat off as possible so that as much of his muscle shows as possible on stage for the judges gets down to 6, 5, 4%. The really dedicated ones can hit 3 or even 2%. It's dangerous to stay that low for long. As soon as that competition is over, he will want to get some fat back on his body. It's just a part of what your body does. Your body needs some. 2 to 4% of a man's body composition must be body fat. That is considered essential fat for basic bodily functions. Going up from there, a man who has body fat from 5 to 13% would be considered athletic. Anywhere in that range, you're going to clearly see his muscles, the muscle definition, a lot of striation, probably some vascularity. That's the appearance of veins. Moving up from there is 14 to 17%. That's a man who is fit. He's going to start to appear a little bit softer. You're not necessarily going to see all of the definition that you might in a very lean bodybuilder, but still a very healthy person. Going up from there, we get to 18 to 25%, and I found this labeled as acceptable in my research. This is probably what would be considered the average adult male at this point. Somewhere around 20%, you're going to start seeing the dad bod that has become so increasingly popular, but which actually is not entirely healthy for you, and I won't go into that right now, but from 25% on up, you get the various ranges of obese. And when I was first measured, when Dan Ward first did my body fat measurements in 2010, I registered at 34.5% body fat. Now, he was using a method with a fairly high margin of error, but it was still in the 30s. And somewhere around 35 to 36%, you get into the morbidly obese category. And that is the category where you should be seeing a doctor. I didn't realize I was carrying around that much body fat, but I was. And it does explain a lot of what I was going through. In 2009, 2010, I had a lot of back pain and I had a lot of leg pain, especially when I first woke up in the morning and tried to stand up. Or if I went for so much as just a 15 to 20 minute ride in the car and then got out and tried to start walking, I felt like an old man. The first few steps every morning, the first few steps getting out of the car, I could not stand up straight without pain. I had to take a few steps and slowly get myself into a fully erect posture. And I just thought, what, am I getting old already? What is this? And then in 2012, when I got my weight down to 211 pounds, there was a morning when I woke up and I got out of bed and I realized it's been a while since I felt all that pain. Yes, because I was no longer carrying around 70 extra pounds of useless weight. And, that much body fat just bearing down on your joints and bones and muscles causes pain and discomfort. Not to mention that much body fat is also, when you're that high in body fat, it's surrounding your organs and it is clogging up the works. It's making it hard for everything to do its job. So that is definitely a percentage to be avoided. I think 25% should be your top. Get it down below that. There are several different methods for measuring body fat. The first one that Dan Ward used on me was the one he was taught as a personal trainer, and it simply involved measuring certain parts of my body, certain limbs and the waist and the hips, and then taking those measurements and putting them into an online calculator which had been developed to estimate body fat based on that. That came out at 34.5%, and that had a margin of error of about 4 percentage points. So I could have been as low as 31.5%. I could have been as high as 38.5%. But as I mentioned earlier, just being in the 30s at all was a bad place to be. The most common form of body fat measurement seems to be the calipers, and I think it's the most common simply because the equipment is available to anyone. You don't need a lot of training to use it, and it's pretty reliable, especially if the same person is doing the measurements over and over again, if you get the same trainer to measure you or if you measure yourself in the same way. And it simply involves taking the calipers and pinching a certain part of the skin in 3 or 4 different areas. There's actually a 3-point version and a 4-point version and a 5-point version. I don't know the difference in reliability among them, but using that measurement, using how much of your skin you can actually pinch and pull out, again, you run it through an online calculator and it tells you your body fat. There are some highly technical methods out there. Unfortunately, they also come with a high expense, so I haven't done them often. One of them is the bod pod, and I was excited a few years ago to discover that our local college has one of those, and so I went and tried it out with Cheryl Pitkin. And basically, it's this giant egg that you sit in, and using scientific principles involving air pressure, it actually is able to pretty well pinpoint your body fat. There was some disparity in my measurements between that and other methods, so I haven't done it often, and both Cheryl and I found it odd just how much disparity. But that is not to discount the possibility of the bod pod. It has been rated by researchers as being very accurate overall. There was one method I was wanting to try for years called the hydrostatic tank, or the dunk tank. And again, I was delighted to find that our local community college had one. And so starting a few years ago, I've tried to get up there once every couple years and have that measurement done just to see where I stand. And I had the opportunity to do that on May 9th of this year. And that's what we're going to proceed with now. So let's go to the Central Oregon Community College in Bend, Oregon, and my meeting with Jeffrey Strang. I'm here at the Central Oregon Community College Physiology Lab's hydrostatic dunk tank room, where I'm going to get my body composition evaluated by Professor Jeffrey. Are you professor?
No, sir.
Okay, by Jeffrey Strang. We'll just go with that. This is something that in an ideal world would have happened on January 1st to really satisfy my OCD, but it didn't. So May 9th will have to do, and that'll still give me an idea of where I am in order to reach my goals by the end of the year. So, Jeffrey, I've been up here before, but for the sake of viewers who haven't, what's going on with this big tank of water?
Right, so like Brian said, this is a hydrostatic underwater weigh tank. Uses the application of Archimedes' principle, right? So we're going to measure his mass underwater, and the amount of water he displaces is going to equal the amount of force that's being produced on his body, right? So the buoyancy. Really what we're going to do is compare his mass outside of the water and under the water, and then from there we get the density. Depending on the temperature of the water, the density is going to be different, so that gets taken into consideration. Ultimately, after getting his body density, we'll be able to estimate his body fat percentage using what's called the Siri equation. The reason why this works is because fat is typically less dense than water. Muscle mass, lean mass, anything other than fat is usually more dense than water. So the more fat you have, the more buoyant you'll be, right? The more muscle you have, the more dense, the heavier you'll be underwater. Water is typically about 1 gram per milliliter density-wise. So that's what makes all this work. This is usually pretty accurate to within 2%, plus or minus 2%. So it's regarded as the silver standard. DEXA is arguably the golden standard. However, that's often impractical. It's expensive. You're exposed to radiation, and you have to seek it out at like a hospital or clinical setting. So this is usually more available, and it's the most practical method, in my opinion, other than skin fold measurements, which we will be doing today, it sounds like, yeah.
So in very simple terms, some smart people long ago figured out the weight of fat outside the water and the weight of fat inside the water, and we're going to compare my two weights, and the computer is going to calculate my body fat based on the difference.
Right, well, really what we did was we blended up guinea pigs, and that's... Obviously, we can't do that with humans, but that's how we discovered typical body composition for, I guess a living being. But that's not a practical method. So we know that fat is less dense than water typically. So we split the body into 2 compartments, fat and fat-free, and that's what we're going to...
I'm assuming when you say we, you mean people long ago with no ethical sense of treatment of animals.
Researchers,
okay.
We were a little less sensitive to animals back in the day. Fortunately, we've implemented some much stricter regulations with animals.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started with that. We're going to switch to the microphone on the camera. Can't promise how well those of you watching this will hear anything said or done after that, but the point is now the visuals. You really pinched. Cheryl was nicer.
Well, it's to ensure that you're really getting that separation, right? So the calipers are usually accurate to within plus or minus 3.5%, and it's based on the assumption that you store approximately 1/3 of your fat subcutaneously. However, as we age, we tend to start storing fat more internally or deeper around the visceral organs. Obviously, we can't pinch that with the calipers. It's not superficial. So it can lose its accuracy and underestimate body fat percentage for older individuals who happen to be storing fat in more deeper spaces, such as around your organs. Thickness of all 3 of these.
Jeffrey uses the 3-point method of calipers, so 1 right up near the pectoral muscle, 1 at the abdomen, and then 1 on the quadricep, or the upper thigh. And then he puts those measurements into a computer, and out pops a number.
That is the same for the old one. Yep. Go ahead and push any air bubbles out of your suit. Go ahead and dunk your head. Get any air out of your hair.
The college offers 3 different packages for getting your body fat evaluated, and I chose the one that involved the calipers and the hydrostatic tank. They offer that one as a combination just because when you take those 2 measurements combined and you get the average between them, that has been demonstrated to be a pretty good way, pretty efficient way and cost-effective way of getting your body fat percentage nailed down pretty closely. The tank experience itself is a little creepy. I can go swimming where I take a big breath and go underwater and hold my breath. But for the purposes of accurately measuring just your body's buoyancy with no air in it, you have to exhale first. And being underwater with no air is, it's strange. And the first time I did it years ago, it was, there was this, you're underwater and you know that if you inhale, you're going to get a bunch of water in your lungs. And so after the few seconds that it requires to be under there is this panic that starts to grow until eventually you just have to pop back up and inhale. And you have to stay under long enough to let the water get reasonably still. That's how the little measuring devices on the sides can tell you how much water you've displaced and how much you weigh under there and whatever scientific principles are involved. So yeah, it is, it's not the most convenient way to get your body fat measured, even though it is considered one of the most reliable and most accurate. This is a newer tank replacing the old one that the college had, and the old one was much larger and more spacious. In this smaller one, I was required to sit on that platform, and in the sitting position, trying to bend over forward while sitting cross-legged and get all the air out, I felt like I wasn't getting enough oxygen out of my lungs. And so I suggested to Jeffrey that for the third one, I go to the kneeling position, which is what the old tank used to use. So I got into my kneeling position and performed the test that way. But just after I got under the water, I kind of hiccuped a little, inhaled a little water, and lurched. And when I sat back, after hearing a pop as I was coming up, I noticed that I had broken the darn thing. So there's that. If I had just left well enough alone and done things Jeffrey's way...
As long as the load cell inside is fine, it's just the cable, which it looks like that's the case. You got a couple on that.
I should do my James Bond exit, coming up out of the beach. I'm a little disappointed. If that measurement was accurate at 27.6%, then my body fat has gone up since the last time I had it seriously evaluated. But, and that also increases the challenge of getting it down to my goal before the end of this year. But, you know, I have a number now, and that gives me something to work for over the next 7 3/4 months. So we'll see what happens. If that number was inaccurate, okay, I can live with that. The important thing is that at the end of the year, it's gone down. That means I've gone in the right direction. Anyway, that's my report from COCC. I've got a moment or two here on my lunch hour at work just to wrap up this whole thought of body fat and pass on one more additional idea to you. And not to undercut everything I've just made this whole episode about, but you don't need to know your body fat percentage to make progress toward better health. It's information I wanted. I wanted that data for myself just because I like having those benchmarks and ways to track my progress. But if you are coming from an overweight position, you probably already know it. So go ahead and get started on that. If you never get your body fat percentage measured, that's fine. But I do want to encourage you. As I said earlier in the video, I had a lot of back pain and a lot of leg pain, and I didn't know why. And it's not like I all of a sudden woke up one morning feeling better. It's that I woke up one morning realizing it had been a long time since I had had that back and leg pains. All that excessive body fat was not good for me, and it was hampering my lifestyle. And I guarantee that if you're overweight, it's hampering yours as well. So go ahead and start the exercise, start the dieting, and work on bringing that down. And again, you don't have to actually get it measured to know. You'll know when you're bringing it down. Take pictures. That's easy to do. That's very cost-free these days. There are all kinds of ways to get a scale, and you'll see it. You'll see it happen. Check your photos every few months and compare them, and on it goes. So with or without the body fat number, the body fat test, go ahead and do it. You will feel so much better. I guess that was more advice than an actual tip, but there it is.